Hey yo.
Hey everybody, it's We Teach Love here. How are y'all? Okay.
Good.
Can't
You
answer
good?
back. Yeah. So we were talking about change, and specifically, of course, with regard to relationships and how change is natural and healthy. But for some reason, when it comes to relationships, it's not something we really expect people to do. We kind of expect the way I see it is we expect that once we find our person, our best friend, our spouse, our whatever, right? They are what they are to us, and then they're not supposed to change.
Yeah.
Because that's part of being a good friend or a good spouse is that they're consistent and you can rely on them to be reliable.
Mm-hmm. And I would say there's even different layers to this. I think that that's definitely a one perspective of many.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that maybe it's trending that we're becoming more aware, and there's a higher consciousness happening in our world, and so now I think people are starting to have the conversation that we are going to change, and it's okay. We're going to make room for each other to change.
Right.
But what we're not then talking about is when we change, our relationship will also change.
Yeah.
And getting comfortable with understanding, making space for that, allowing for that relationship to change, knowing that that's a very uncertain change. We don't know what that means, right? We're going to have to work that out as the changes occur in our individual self.
Yeah.
And then also not... I lost my thought.
It'll come back.
But those are the big things, that the relationship will also change.
Right. And what occurs to me is how do you check in, right, to the changes? Because if you are self-aware and you know that you're changing and you notice those changes in yourself, then maybe you're also in a place where you can articulate those changes to another person. But if you don't articulate those, how do you check in with each other to say, okay, not only am I changing, but now here's how the relationship needs to change, because you know what I mean?
Right. So now we're getting, and now that's a conversation about, one, self-awareness, knowing what you need and want, and then communicating what you need and want, and setting the boundaries and parameters of that. So,
and honoring yourself enough
to be courageous
to
enough.
to be courageous enough and vulnerable enough to say that, because there's also that idea that it needs to change, but if I'm really, sometimes we honor the relationship more than we honor ourselves.
Yeah,
so it's if I really love this person, if I really care about this person, then I'm not going to ask them to change just because I changed.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And a lot of this can be avoided or set up. Maybe you can set yourself up for success early in a relationship if you know it before you get into the relationship. And some of the parameters we set up are don't ever do this, don't ever cheat on me, don't ever lie to me, don't ever change. But those are really limited, rigid parameters. Yeah. And instead we should be setting up parameters leave space for me to be different. Mm-hmm. Let's have consistent conversations once a month about how we feel different, what our needs are that have changed. Because I do think you can change and stay in a relationship, and the relationship can change, but it can stay intimate and stay at the high level if you're changing the relationship as you are changing, as the individuals are changing.
Right.
If you just kind of go about your business the same way, relating in the same way all the time, but all along that way you two are changing.
Yeah.
And you're not flexing with that and bending and kind of molding with that, then at some point it just feels uncomfortable and rigid, and it breaks instead of bends. And so I think on the onset of a relationship, the important parameters to be setting up is how are we going to address and manage the change that's going to happen daily.
That we know is going to happen. That we promise will happen.
Promise. I promise you I'm going to be different. I promise. And I promise this relationship's going to need to be different too. How are we going to make sure we're continually checking in and shifting the relationship and keeping it strong while we're changing?
So I really like the idea of the monthly check-ins. I always think what's healthy about relationships, friendships, whatever it is, spending like quality time together. So like in a relationship, maybe it's like a date night. And so maybe one of those, like if you do weekly date nights, then maybe once a month you like check in. But the thing is, you have to, with each other, which I hate that I even have to say this, what I'm about to say. But in your relationships, you have to create a safe enough space that people will feel like they can tell you what is changing about them. You know what I'm saying? Like, that sounds like you shouldn't be in a relationship with someone that you...
But we are.
But we are. We do that. And if you're being honest with yourself, and you haven't told someone about changes that you need, right, to the relationship, changes that you're experiencing, then you don't feel safe enough with them to do that. That's why. You don't feel safe enough with them, or you care more, for lack of a better word, you care more about the relationship
or their comfort in the relationship
than you do about you
and your comfort
and your growth and your life, like your worth. Like, you care more about
prioritizing it that way,
being comfortable in something that's like convenient and something that is that you've agreed to than you do about like your agreement with yourself,
which is the problem. We agree to the relationship under the parameters of who I am today, without leaving space for the guarantee that you're not going to be this person even tomorrow. Definitely not years from now. And then when that inevitable change happens, you feel boxed in to uphold this promise you made that didn't include room for you to change, or them, the way you could have guaranteed you were going to.
So you know what I'm thinking about is, we have talked about this before in a different way. And we've talked about analogies that really kind of hammer home to me how we do not do this in other areas of our lives. We only do this when it comes to other people and our relationships. So one of the examples that Rachel and I talked about before was, if you're, a 30-something person buying a house, shout out to you, then you might buy, like a multi-level house with lots and lots of stairs, like all those kinds of things, right? Because you're 30-something. But then when you are 70-something, you might not want to be in that house with all those stairs. You might want to be in a single-level house.
But you signed a contract, you're in a mortgage, can't change, no change. Change is not allowed. Just
and
like
no
in our relationships.
Ever
you made a promise.
tell you that you can't now get a house that better fits your needs and who you are at 70. And no one would say, well, you got to honor who you said you were going to be at 30. You have to keep up with that, And another one we talked about was clothing. And how we have like these generations of like, we have like 70s kind of style, 80s style. And what was cool in the 80s was cool the whole time, right? And then it changed. And no one is like, well, no.
You still got to wear that fresh velvet shirt, right? And then stonewash jeans, and then leg warmers with your side pony. You have to.
Because you bought it, and you wore it, and you said it was cool, and so that means it's cool. No one ever says that. Even, I was just thinking about, I committed to one size, and when I can't fit that size no more, I don't be like,
still gotta wear it,
But when it comes to relationships, it's like we have decided this is what it is. Even if we know change is inevitable, we are committed to it being what we said it would be from the beginning. And that's not healthy. If it's not already apparent why it's not healthy, it's not healthy because first and foremost, it doesn't honor you. It doesn't honor your worth and what you deserve in terms of you being able to change and grow and be different. So I think that's like the first thing, is that it doesn't honor
space to grow. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't. You're not honoring your inevitable growth. like choosing to stunt your growth. But then also it's not good because you're not honoring the other person being able to have, that information about you that you've changed and being able to choose you as you grow. You're not trusting each other to do that. You're not, there's not that safe space. You're not honoring each other in that way and each other's boundaries. It's just not a healthy thing to do. So
yeah. And this whole piece is really, we're talking about change that maybe happens more naturally. And then there's also that like intentional change where you are like working on something, a thing. And one of the things we were talking about earlier is that one of the necessary steps of change, even the organic kind, is relapse. It is a requirement of change to go through periods of relapse because it is how you practice. You don't like pick up a basketball and know how to shoot a 3-pointer because somebody showed you one time and now you make them all. It's not how that works.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to be changing my skill set and changing my behaviors, I'm gonna miss some, right? I'm gonna do it wrong. And essentially that's relapse. I'm gonna not do it. I'm gonna go back to my old behavior because it's easier for today and maybe I don't have the capacity to try that hard. And so then a requirement of you as the person nurturing your own change and the people around you that agree to support you through your change is grace because you're going to relapse. And if those people don't have grace or patience to give while you change, well then they can't be your support. You need to find somebody else. If you don't have it, then you're not going to change.
Right.
You're just going to abuse yourself through the process. But to know at the start of change, at the beginning of choosing to be different, you're going to relapse, and that's okay. And it's not bad, it's good. It's actually another repetition. It's another practice round. So that eventually you're going to be really talented at it, and you're going to make 3 out of 4 threes instead of making over 4, right?
That is huge because, that's big because what I'm thinking is like in the context of a relationship, if I sit down at a date night and I say, here's how I'm changing, here's what I need from this relationship now, here's what I need to change about this relationship. Then, and just like for an example, maybe you have kids or something, right? Like maybe you're new parents. The relationship has to change to accommodate that's a big change. There might be smaller ones, but if you become new parents, you probably have to discuss how your relationship is going to change now because your roles have changed. Just to throw out an example. But if that happens and say one date night I'm discussing it, then part of that discussion about the change that needs to happen is also an understanding, creating a safe space that I know as we change our relationship in this way, it's not going to be a perfect, smooth transition. It's going to be one that requires some grace and understanding on both of our parts to get, until we get to where we're in good practice, where we really, this becomes our new normal, for lack of a better word. So, yeah, that's what you just made me think of is like, when you have that conversation about change with another person, what needs to be a part of that conversation, just like it needs to be a part of the actual process, is, okay, now I know we're not going to get this right every time, because we had this conversation. So I'm not going to jump to my ego when you get it wrong.
Yeah, the question is, are you like, you're basically trying to make a commitment and agreement with one another. Like, when we flop, are you still gonna do this with me? Because we're gonna flop, we're gonna fall on our face, it's gonna happen. And are we gonna like get back up together and go, or is that something you don't have capacity, desire to do?
Right.
And let's make an informed choice at the point at which you have an answer to that question. Let's not like pretend you will or can or I can endure you.
Let's not have the romantic notion of that we have grace if we don't. Let's not say, well, this is my best friend, I have to be able to have grace. I may not be in a place to do that. And that doesn't mean that we can't start the process. It means now that person knows, okay, so look, I don't have a lot of grace for this. So I might not be able to you know, to encourage you every time that you
Right.
mess up.
Right.
Like you might have to find that inside, you know,
Or somewhere
with
else, another support
with
system.
someone else. But being able to make an informed decision just to start the process of change, I think is important too.
And part of one of the things, especially when like referring to abuse, one of the things that it was on your Jenga piece, which I loved, is that everybody has the right to move in and out of a relationship freely, right? And if you try to eliminate somebody's freedom to choose or to shift the way they engage in the relationship with you, that is a form of abuse. And so if the person with the information in that date night check-in, whatever, says, oh, I can't, I don't want to, I don't have capacity, I don't, whatever their answer is, and it isn't what you wanted to hear, but you maybe shift in a dishonest way and say, that's fine, I don't need you to be that person, I'll figure it out on my own, which you probably know in that moment is damn well not true.
Yeah.
You're manipulating them to stay, and that's abusive.
That's abusive.
And telling them they
abusing
can't.
yourself.
And or telling them they can't go, and then that's abusive. So all this to say, like, you have, I mean, honesty is crucial, obviously. Being direct about your needs, your boundaries, and what you have to give is crucial, which requires awareness. And it requires you being able to have that conversation with yourself and having a safe space with yourself so that you aren't abusing, manipulating, tricking yourself into things that aren't real.
Right.
And then being able to articulate that to somebody in a way that allows them to make their choices, and then honoring their choices, whatever they might be, right?
Yeah. And honoring where they are. I have had conversations like this one, like it's just making me think of conversations I've had with like partners and stuff like that, where I, you know, was asking them like what they had the capacity to do, and they were saying, I don't know. And I was like, well, that's fair. I don't want you to tell me an answer, you know, if you really don't know. Like, let me accept that as the truth, and let me make a decision based on you not knowing versus you feeling like you're obligated to commit to an affirmative when you can't, when you're not necessarily like in a place to do that, and vice versa. I want to feel safe enough to say, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I have the capacity to do that. Or no, I don't have the capacity to do that. Versus feeling like, if I'm going to be a good friend, I'm going to be a good partner.
That's what the book says I should say.
Right,
I should say yes.
You know, I should
Don't do that.
I should do that. Don't, you know, dishonor yourself that way. So that's just what you made me think of. It's like I've definitely been in that situation where it's like, oh, I don't know what I have the capacity to do.
Yeah, and we just trade opportunities to make informed choices, right? Because then if you don't know, and I need you to know right now, or I need to tell you, okay, well, you have till, like, you have a month because I need to get moving on this thing, and I need support, and if you can't be it, I got to go find it.
Right.
Like, we just flip-flop informed choices, right? And I think that we take life too seriously. We take relationships way too seriously. And so it limits our ability to be really honest, because we're like, well, if I say this thing and it's not the right thing to say, or they don't accept it, or it could be the end of our relationship.
It could be.
It could be. Guess what? That's okay. It probably should be. And that's okay. You don't have to force the relationship, because starting and ending relationships is hard. It's not. Relationships are changing all the time. All you're doing when you're telling fibs, or you're not being upfront and being direct about what your capacity is and allowing them to make informed choices, all you're doing is stretching that relationship into a facade, for one. And it's going to break. It's a guarantee. So it's better to be honest. Relationships are going to change, like it or not. You are just resisting the change when you aren't upfront about who you are, what you want, what you can do, what you can give. And when people make informed choices, they're their choices and they're not personal to you. And we just have to take that less seriously, right? And less personally. Because we would move so much more easily with other humans if we would allow those other humans to tell us their truth and we told them ours.
To just be human.
I mean, all of this is about relationships, right?
Yeah.
And we could even talk about how it has a lot to do with the relationship with things. So one of the things we know when we talk about addiction is relapse is pretty much guaranteed, because these people are practicing not using something that they enjoy, honestly, using.
And their bodies have become dependent on.
And they're likely going to relapse. And I've worked with addicts, and I'm not mad. Like when they go through that process, I'm like, good, repetition number 2. Like you're practicing being sober. You're not going to be great at it the first time.
Yeah.
Let's practice. Let's get reps. Let's go. But it's important to have that mindset, because one of the things I think that happens with addicts that feel guilty for relapse, which their support systems are often the ones that make them feel guilty, like they've failed, is that sends them into depression and potentially makes them suicidal. And there's like all kinds of things that
all this
really
shame
great people
around this very natural process of change.
Requirement of change.
Yeah.
And instead we should be celebrating the opportunity to practice again. Good. We're going to get really good at being sober, because here we go again. We're going to practice.
Yeah.
And we should be, obviously we're not excited that somebody uses again, because that's a really challenging time for them. But we are excited when we're like, okay, so when we starting? And we should get excited. And I think it changes the tone around rehab and getting sober. And while that's like I think that's a big area where we see relapse is more okay, it's also okay because when we change in these little ways, like I start taking out the trash and I've never done that in the house, I'm gonna relapse.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And it just gives me one more time to practice starting to take the trash out.
Yeah. You know? And you'll be learning different things about it along the way. I think what's interesting about what you just said with addicts is one thing to keep at the forefront of your mind, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this in another video. Change, along with everything else really that we talk about, requires a lot of vulnerability and a lot of courage, because it's very easy to feel that guilt and shame, to feel like a failure, to feel like just that disappointment in not doing things the way you expected and planned to do them, the way that other people expect for you to do them. And there's the way that we treat each other as we're going through change and as we're learning new ways of doing things. We have to create enough space for that person to be vulnerable in that change, like to be vulnerable in understanding it's not going to come easy necessarily. You know, like we have to give each other that space. And I just feel like in relationships, we are so quick. And as much as I agree with you at the beginning of this, you were saying that we're like getting to a much more self-aware place, or we're getting to a much more spiritual place.
I'm not sure we're there. It's trending.
It's trending. What's also trending is, cutting people off.
That's true.
Throwing people away. I see people on Instagram with a little trash can emoji all the time, like throwing people away. That's what we do. It's like, oh, that person had their chances. Like if you think about it, that's what we do a lot. And not saying that there aren't times that it is healthy to cut people out.
There's a tone to do it with, and that's not the
there's
tone.
There's a tone and there's almost a process, right? Like in seeing their humanity, if you are cutting them off and you're doing it with the wrong tone, if you're cutting them off because you are also ignoring their humanity, because you are also just not willing to make space for them to be different
or
in the first place,
or on your end, like I'm hold you accountable. If you're cutting them off and calling them trash, you're trash, because they are not trash because you no longer are relating with them in the same way you used to, and you can let them go or get space or make an informed choice to interact with them differently and not claim them to be nothing or less than or inferior. They're not any of those things. They're just not for you right now, and that's okay. Totally okay. You don't have to do it with that tone that they are somehow flawed and so you don't want them anymore. No, they are fine.
I feel so bad right now.
Why?
I've been saying that Tristan Thompson is trash.
Oh.
I have been calling him trash.
His behaviors are trashy.
My bad.
But Tristan is...
He's absolutely human.
Hurt people though.
And so...
We don't know. I don't know why
I just
Tristan...
felt a little convicted just now.
No, that's good though. That's good. Perspective.
I've been calling him trash.
Look, we sitting right here on this floor changing in front of y'all.
So y'all don't hold me to what I did say that. Don't hold me to that.
People's behaviors can be trash. For sure.
Yeah.
The way he's acting is not right. And he's not...
But if I were giving him some space just to see his humanity, like people are trying to do with other people involved in all these situations, if I were extending that to him as well, I would not call him trash just because he made...
Trashy choice.
Made, poor decisions and decisions that don't honor him or any of the people
or
involved.
any of those people. Exactly.
Woo!
Yeah. It's a day for healing.
I know.
I forgive you.
Thank you. I forgive myself.
You're good. That's what I really care about.
I forgive myself. Man. That's
a word.
Right. All right, y'all. Well, we love y'all.
We do.
We hope y'all got something out of all of that we were just saying about change. There were a lot of nuggets in there.
And kind of two dynamics, right? Like this organic change that happens and then this intentional change that happens. And they're very different processes sometimes. And they require a little bit different levels of grace and understanding and communication. So we are really complex individuals in a really simple life.
And we just need to accept that. Not only about ourselves, but about other people.
Everybody.
Like do it both ways. Accept that about yourself. You are complex. You are going to change, and that's healthy, and that's good. And so will other people, and that's also healthy and good. And shout out, my shirt says Audrey, Gloria, Angela, and Bill.
All the girls.
It's Women's History Month.
It is.
Yeah, so
rocking it. I don't have anything cute better than I'm gonna change my clothes when we get off this call.
Okay.
All right, Friday Love Fest.
Right. We love y'all.
Love y'all.
We teach love.